Welcome to the Crosswind Approach podcast. I'm your host, Michael Baldree, CPA. This podcast is for nonprofit and mission-driven leaders who desire to lead with confidence while navigating uncertain conditions. On each episode of the Crosswind Approach, we'll have a conversation with a leader who has traversed real turbulence while leading their organization. Together, we explore the habits that help organizations become resilient and remain mission-focused. If you're leading a mission-driven organization and looking to navigate toward greater clarity and confidence, you're in the right place. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Crosswind Approach. Welcome aboard. Welcome to the Crosswind Approach. I'm your host, Michael Baldree, founder of Crosswind CFO Advisory. And in aviation, there's a window of time that every pilot respects above all others. It's not a cruising altitude. It's not approach and landing. It's the takeoff and roll. And the moments between when the throttle goes forward and when the wheels leave the ground, that's the window where some of the most consequential decisions in aviation history have actually been made, and where some of the most preventable disasters have unfolded. And so today we're going to look at a story from the runway, a crew that faced a critical decision in that narrow window, and they made the right call and actually walked away to tell about it. And then we're going to apply that story directly to two turbulent phases nonprofit organizations often face. One, leadership transition, and second, a major operational change. So let's dive right in. So the aviation story comes from July 23rd, 1983. A brand new Air Canada Boeing 767 sits on the ground in Montreal, and a routine flight, it's supposed to be to Edmonton, but before a single passenger boards, the crew already knows something is wrong. The fuel quantity gauges are not working. So they run a manual calculation. Everyone checks the numbers and they depart anyway. Doesn't make sense to me. And somewhere over Red Lake, Ontario, the left engine goes quiet. Then the right engine also goes out, and at 41,000 feet with 69 people on board, Flight 143 becomes a 150-ton glider. What the crew did next was absolutely extraordinary. Captain Robert Pearson, who happened to be a trained glider pilot, recalled that there was a decommissioned Air Force base in Gimli, Manitoba. What he did not know was that that base had since been turned into a motorsports park, and the runway was full of race cars and families on summer vacation. And he, the Captain Pearson, still brought that 767 flight down on that runway anyway. Nose gear collapse, sparks everywhere, and the crowd ran. But every single person on board walked away alive. And the plane became known as the Gimli Glider and flew with Air Canada for another 25 years. But here's what I want you to remember. The disaster had its roots not in the air. It started on the ground before the wheels ever left the runway. And that's going to be important because we're going to apply that to nonprofit leadership. Because before the wheels left the runway, the gauges were broken before departure. The fuel calculation error happened before departure. The decision to press on anyway was made before departure. And by the time the engines went silent, the outcome had already been shaped on the ground in Montreal. Nonprofit organizations face this same dynamic every time a new leader steps in or a major system change gets launched. The risks that surface 6 months in were almost always present on that very first day. They just had not announced themselves yet. My guest today has spent more than 2 decades making sure organizations get the ground operation right before they ever pushed the throttle forward. Ruth Thomas is the vice president of finance and administration at Sat7 USA, a Christian satellite television ministry reaching across the Middle East and North Africa, a phenomenal organization. And Ruth has led the finance team at Sat7 since 2003. And in that time, she's guided multiple incoming presidents through leadership transition, led the organization to strategically adopt a caging system, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. That caging system outsources their mail donations, and she's also navigated a full migration from one CRM to another. She's a credentialed Christian nonprofit leader. She holds a master's degree in leadership, and she believes at her core that transparency is the foundation of donor trust. Ruth, so glad that you are willing to be on the podcast with me today. I've had the privilege of working with you on your team, and just excited for our audience to be able to learn from your experience and your wisdom. So welcome to the Crosswind Approach podcast.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here.
Yes. I'm glad to have you. And let's just dive into the first question. And this is looking at that aviation story and applying it to nonprofit leadership concerning new leadership transition. So you've had the unique experience of helping more than one incoming executive director or president find their footing during those critical early months. And so I wanted to just start with a question about that transition. When a new leader steps in, what is the single greatest really financial risk that most boards and outgoing leaders fail to see coming with a transition like that?
Good question. So I think it depends on the person, obviously. It depends on the new leader, what their style is. But you want to make sure that they're informed from day one what the current financial system, current financials are like, what the reserves are like. Make sure they know what the systems in place are, and assurance that things aren't going to stop working just because there's new leadership. And I think there's some risk, obviously, of HR changes. If somebody on the team was gunning for that job and didn't get it, they may leave. So there's always that risk of turnover. And sometimes I don't think that's foreseen.
Those are great points. So from your perspective, could you walk us through what a healthy leadership transition actually looked like from your seat in the finance director position, and what did you kind of put in place proactively to kind of make sure the incoming leader could take the controls with confidence and not be confused and facilitate a smooth transition? Sure.
So I think it's important to meet that leader before he or she takes the job. I mean, they could already be hired, but to at least have some kind of a conversation before day one, just so that they know what your capabilities are, what systems are in place, get their IT system set up ahead of time, all those practical things. And obviously with a president transition, you're going to need sign-ins created for bank accounts and all sorts of things that, wouldn't happen with a normal HR transition. So you want to give them access to things they need to see, give them the proper permissions on the database, give them some training. We had a 90-day plan that we were following in the most recent transition.
Yeah. And so was that 90-day plan developed through some of the other previous transitions that you walked through and kind of lessons you learned from that, or had you used a plan on every transition?
No, I think it was driven more in his plan, but feeding into that were input from each department. So
gotcha.
Yeah, so we each contributed what we knew. I had a checklist a mile long of things that we needed to cover. And, it changes from year to year because you're using different vendors or different bank accounts or whatever. So
Yeah.
it you can't have one set checklist forever.
Yeah. But
Right.
I'm sure that that definitely helps you make sure that you're hitting, not missing anything, and being able to map
Right.
out that transition.
Right. And of course, you've got some leaders that are going to be more into the financials and the details than others, some that want certain KPIs. And so building out those reports and making sure that they're aware and confident in the numbers. I think
Yeah.
the other thing you want to make sure is that they're aware that you have insurance policies in place, that you have when your lease renews, when deadlines are coming way far in advance, so that they know, okay, in June your health insurance is going to renew and we got to talk about that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So there's just a lot of different deadlines during the year that admin takes care of.
Yes. And you just touched a little bit on every situation is different, which also helps us realize that every leader's personality is different. And so that
Right.
kind of segues into my next question, and that every leader brings a different leadership style. And so that shift can be sometimes jarring for the team around them. And so since you've navigated multiple leadership transitions at SAT 7, what has your experience taught you over those different transitions about adapting to a new leader style and helping build rapport quickly and trust quickly, especially as that person, who's responsible for bringing financial clarity?
Right, right. Well, I think there's always anxiety among the team leading
Hmm.
through transitions, and even in the first couple of months.
Yeah.
So having a lot of meetings, having a lot of one-on-one time with that leader is important for everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, Joint meetings, individual meetings, face-to-face meetings, just to learn about them, learn about what they're looking for, and then doing training if there's a change in policy or change in practice,
Yeah.
doing that training proactively. And yeah, I think we've seen good results with the current transition,
Yeah.
and the team is happy, and I think we're on the right track.
Yeah. So
Another
really,
thing one more thing that we did this year was um, uh, employment survey to get a baseline of the employees' take on where we were culturally and
okay.
with benefits and such. Best
Yeah.
Christian workplace survey,
Yeah.
and that's been very helpful.
Okay. So really, providing opportunities to kind of really build that relationship early on, and doing a lot of listening to each other on values and what's important, establishing that cadence of communication early. And then it's really interesting what you said, doing an internal kind of survey of your existing team as you prepare for that arrival of the new leader, so that maybe they can really understand the culture and the
Yeah, we actually did
values.
the survey after he started, so
Okay. Yeah.
but it was in early days, so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
gives
That
us
makes a lot of
a
sense.
look at where we are right now, and then we'll repeat it annually
Yeah.
to get a sense
Excellent.
of the culture.
Yeah. So really allowing the team to kind of start fresh with each other and begin to build that momentum and rapport with each other as the new team builds the new adventure together.
Right.
Excellent. So we've hit on executive leader changes, and how that impacts a CFO or a finance director, and how they are a key person in facilitating that change for the CEO or executive director. I also would like to look at operational changes, because those are also major changes that can be disruptive, and there can be some turbulence for nonprofits. And so you, during your time at SAT 7, have relied on a traditional system where donors mailed their gifts directly to your post office box and your team handled everything from there. But at some point, you all at Sat7 made the decision to move to what's called a caging operation, where an outside firm takes over the receiving, the opening, and the processing of that donor mail, and then the funds are directly deposited into your bank account. Can you explain what that transition looked like, why caging has not only become, it was attractive for you guys, but it's becoming to be increasingly attractive model for nonprofits? What finally made Sat7 say, hey, it's time for us to make this move?
Right. Well, I can blame it on COVID, but
okay. We get to blame a lot of things on COVID.
Certainly, that had a bearing on it. So we have a small staff. We are separated by many states. Some of our people are remote or were remote before COVID.
Okay.
But some of us were in the office. So while we were in the office, it was fairly easy to pick up the mail, sort the mail, open the mail with multiple people present so that it's not, there was some control over that, what was happening. And you had multiple people who had hands in it and were actively doing that operation. But once COVID happened, that all changed. We started working from home. You had a higher risk of employee fraud or something happening. You didn't have controls. We were taking checks home. We had cash coming in, credit card processing. It was just not good. And the board recognized that, we recognized it, and we had started looking even before that at what we could do. And we felt like there was a tipping point when we got to the point where, okay, the volume is so volatile. If we do a big mailing and there's so much mail coming in, we're slammed for 2-3 weeks at a time or a month, and we need more help. And then the next month we don't, and the next month we do. And so we're either going to have to hire somebody to help or we need to outsource this. And so when we got to this tipping point, I called it, where the volume justified the cost, that's when we really got serious about it. And the board pushed us to go ahead and make that move. And we settled on a company. Of course, we did our due diligence and whatnot. I would say the only mistake we made in the process was probably trying to do that toward the end of a year when the volume is so crazy busy. They pushed us to do it, in a calendar year instead of waiting until the next spring. And we rushed the process.
Gotcha.
It was a bit hard to deal with.
I can imagine. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that that you guys made that decision during the time of COVID, and I often talk to organizations who talk about major changes that they made because of that period, that it pushed them to make changes that they might not have made had they not gone through COVID. Would you say that you maybe wouldn't have made this change maybe for another 5-10 years, or do you think either way, regardless, you still would have made it?
I think either way it was coming, and I had already shopped it and looked at it. Obviously there's a cost, and then it's a lot of changes to your mailing. So for example, if you have 5 different styles of mailings, they have to program in the response devices for every single one, and they want scan lines, and they want uniformity, and this box has to be so much space around it, and there's just all kinds of details that we didn't anticipate going into it because we'd never used one before. Because they do a lot of OCR, character recognition scanning. They have to have everything laid out a certain way on each response device.
Okay. Wow. And so a lot is at stake with a change like that, because you're, relying on those funds coming in. A lot of your reputation with donors is on the line. So what did the early turbulence look like, and how did you navigate through that?
Yeah, the biggest turbulence, I think, is changing your address. And
Okay.
yeah, so
Mm.
changing from, a PO box in Maryland to a PO box in Iowa, and people hang on to envelopes for 10 years. so
Mm.
so dealing with the address change was a huge deal, and the questions that came along with that. Did you really move to another state? Donors had questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big deal. And then just getting the data right, getting all the fields to be right and the data to come in cleanly. It was a struggle for the first 6 months or so, just to work through all the bugs.
Mm-hmm.
There were programming issues. There were, spelling issues, getting the right fields in the right place. IRA gifts, donor advised fund gifts, all have to be processed a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So on the other side of that turbulence for 6 months, you said it took to kind of make it,
clean it up. Yeah.
yeah, to clean it up. On the other side of that, what have the efficiency gains been like? Has it been worth it? And as you look back, are you, able to say, yeah, I'm glad we made this big change?
Yeah, I'm glad we did. And the controls are much better. So,
Okay.
we know that I visited their facility, and we know that, the gifts that they picking up from the local post office, or they're actually delivered to their loading dock. It's a high volume operation, and everything gets separated, everything gets scanned. So we get a scan of every single document and every single check, and they separate things. Cash goes into a locked area. Credit cards are processed under PCI compliance. Everything is locked down.
Okay.
And yeah, and there's cameras everywhere. There's just a lot of
Yeah.
dual control, or really more than dual control, where there's so many different steps to the process that the person that's opening the mail is not processing the mail, and so forth. So yeah, it makes the auditor very happy, because
Excellent. Okay.
there's the separation of duties. So then, once we got it all working more efficiently, yeah, obviously we don't have to open the mail. We don't have to pick up the mail. For instance, we may have had a very heavy volume of mail just this past week, where, one day there might be 100 pieces of mail, and the next day there might be 500.
Okay.
Well, that's a huge volume difference. If it was our team, it would take us multiple days to process
Yeah.
500 gifts.
Wow.
They can do it in one day. And I guess the main thing we had to get used to is that there's probably a 2 to 3 day delay in mail processing. So what if they receive 500 pieces of mail on Monday? We're not going to see it till Wednesday.
Okay.
But that doesn't hurt our bottom line. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're used to that delay, and
Yeah.
and we can pull reports of what the volume is day by day.
Mm-hmm. So
And then I'd say the biggest efficiency too is that they are sending those checks directly to our bank through an electronic process, which we had to get set up. So we get that money the same day.
Wow.
The bank gets copies of all the checks, or the credit cards get processed the same day, and the cash gets put into a local bank. So everything happens so seamlessly that we didn't have to scan all those checks. We didn't have to proof out all those batches. We're just getting a CSV file that we can then import into the system.
So
And obviously, we're still doing double checking on our side, but it has given us greater efficiency.
wow. So huge amount of efficiency, and you're able to then kind of channel that time and energy into
Other things,
other things that would bring you greater return on investment for your organization. So as you look kind of back on that transition and that experience, are there lessons that you can apply to future times where you go through major organizational changes that this specific experience taught you?
Yeah, I always say that you need plenty of lead time to get it done right. I think we
Mm,
rushed it.
okay.
That wasn't entirely their fault. It was our fault because of when we wanted to schedule it. But even they admit that they learned from us because we
Okay.
were one of the few organizations that had never used a lockbox or caging company before. So our coupons, print materials were not where they needed to be.
Okay.
Where somebody like, I don't know, a big company, American Red Cross or something, if they were changing from one company to another, their coupons, their response devices are already set up with scan lines and
Mm-hmm.
standardization. Ours were not. So that was a big chore on our side. And we had to get it done in advance because they had to be ready to start receiving it.
Mm.
And yeah, so it was a lot of prep work.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just learn that things take time, and if they tell you it's going to take 3 months, plan on 6 months, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that difference between what our expectations are and what reality is can
really
create a
is,
lot of
yeah,
stress. And so I've learned to expect worse, and that
right,
way you're not stressed during the process. And
right.
I thought the other wise thing that you pointed out is that if you could go back and do it all again, is regarding the timeline of
Time of
how your
year,
year
yeah,
looks, and maybe scheduling that. But I know that in those circumstances there wasn't a lot of flexibility. But for those considering a change like that, definitely
right.
consider the volume of your year and trying to do it at a lower volume time.
Lower volume
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
right,
Okay. So let's talk a little bit now about another big operational change that you've led through, which has to do with your CRM. You've gone
right,
from one CRM to another, and that can be a really scary thing for any nonprofit because so much of your assets is stored within your donor database, and
right.
losing that, or not knowing what the new CRM will be like can be a bit scary. So as you guys were considering that, what was kind of the breaking point when you decided that the risk of moving to a new CRM outweighed the kind of the rewards of
Right.
just sticking with the existing one?
Yeah, there were multiple factors. So one was cost.
Okay.
We felt that the old CRM was getting too costly. There was the ability to store documents within it or within a partner organization, and that cost was changing. Um, the software company itself had promised and promised and promised to roll out a new version, which it never did. It just kept
Okay.
adding a new fuzzy interface to the old version and charging us more.
Mm,
So there were a lot of factors that sort of drove me to keep looking until we found something that we really thought would be successful. And I have to admit, we were early adopters in Virtuous. It wasn't perfect,
okay.
but what we liked about it was the ease of use, and it was friendlier for the development staff. It wasn't as robust on the accounting side, but it was robust on the development side. So it
Okay.
made it easier for our team to get their notes in, to pull data they need,
Mm,
and see what they need to see. And I felt that was more important than the accounting side because we also were using QuickBooks on the accounting side, and we could deal with, as long as we got clean data over, we were okay. I
yeah.
didn't need all those financial reports out of the system.
Okay.
So at that time, one thing that concerned me, and I was happy to hear that Virtuous had already done some Razor's Edge conversions. So what we weren't their guinea pig.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And so that was important to me because
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure they had done it before, they had mapped out the fields, they knew what they were doing. And I was very happy with that conversion process. Obviously, you have to make decisions about, is this data really important?
Mm-hmm.
Bring over. You couldn't map everything over exactly. So you either lose some data or you combine some data or whatever you have to do to get uh, to get it over cleanly.
Yeah.
And we worked through that. And we actually did not bring over all of our documents that had been stored in the prior system. We kept that system alive for a while until we were satisfied we didn't need it anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, we wanted to have a couple of years of history. So we kept it going redundantly until we were satisfied with that.
Yeah. A lot at stake and on a move like that. But if you stay with the status quo, there can also be a lot of stake because as your organization grows, you need to be able to have a system that can grow with you. And it sounds like you had to make that change so that you could continue to grow at the pace.
And yeah, and the billing structure was totally different. It's based on the number of records, number of constituents, rather than a flat fee based on the software itself. And Razor's Edge may have changed since then. I haven't kept up with it. I know it's still a very popular program.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of reach our make a approach towards the runway of this podcast, as you look across all the kind of transitions that we've talked about, which was the most personally demanding for you as a financial leader? Was it some of those executive director CEO transition? Was it more of an operational
I think
transition?
it's more operational. I think I think the software change, converting a CRM and going to a caging company were more taxing than hiring a new president.
Anything specific
you get
about
the right person, it's pretty easy.
Yeah. What do you think it is about the operational changes like the caging transition or CRM that was so demanding for you personally?
Well, it's donor data and it's gift receiving, and you want to get it right. And our accuracy has always been our top priority. So yeah, just challenges of, like when we changed CRMs, if you can imagine that you had, 50 queries and 10 reports that you relied on all the time, you had to rebuild everything.
Yeah.
So it took a year or two to really get comfortable and get everything built that you really wanted built out. And we're still building. And then the caging company just took time to get it right. And if I had to do that again, it would be a lot easier because we've done it once before. Then it would just be moving to a competitor. It wouldn't be rebuilding everything from scratch.
Excellent. Well, if an executive director, nonprofit CEO is sitting right now listening to this podcast, what is one piece of advice you might give them as they're navigating a leadership change or a major system change at their nonprofit?
Well, the leadership changes are usually driven by the board, and, just maybe ask them to spend enough time and get the right search team together to get it right. It's hugely important to get the right leader that's values and is excited about the mission and has the right experience. I mean, that's more important than anything I can convey. So spend the money, spend the time, get it right. As far as, changing systems, do your research, talk to people that have already been through it, and, map it out and then add extra couple of months to the timeline. And, and you'll be all right.
Those are very wise. I really love the part as you're considering a leadership change to not rush the process, to really do the proper vetting and make sure the values align. Because once you kind of get into that, it can be much more painful if it's not if there's not a good fit for both parties. So that's really wise.
And I recommend you use a search firm because you're going to get candidates that you otherwise wouldn't have no access to.
Excellent. So Ruth, for those listening today, if they would like to connect with you and learn more about the work you and your team are doing, where could they find you?
They can find me on the set7usa.org website.
Okay.
Or on LinkedIn.
Okay.
LinkedIn profile, and email is Ruth Thomas at sat7.org.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being on the show today. Before we close, here is this week's Crosswind checklist. 3 financial best practices every nonprofit leader must have in place. Number 1, your budget is not a document you finish in December and forget about. It's a document you need to review against actual results every single month and ask why gaps exist. That monthly conversation is where financial clarity is built and where bad surprises get caught early. Number 2, build a cash reserve equal to at least 60 to 90 days of operating expenses. Most nonprofits that collapse do not collapse because of bad mission. They usually collapse because they ran out of runway. So start building that reserve now, even if it takes you years to get there. And number 3, know your Form 990 inside and out because it is filed for the public to see, and your donors can read it, your board should review it, and it should tell a story you are proud of and one that reflects the integrity of your mission. Thank you for joining me today on the Crosswind Approach. This is so great to have Ruth Thomas on the show today. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, here are 3 things I would ask you to do right now. Number 1, subscribe to the Crosswind Approach podcast so you never miss an episode. 2, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's easy to do. It takes less than 1 minute, and it helps other mission-focused leaders find this show. And finally, share this episode with a leader in your network who is staring down a transition or a system change that they have been putting off for years. And for you, if you've navigated your own organizational change, I would love to hear about it. And please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Would love to have you on the podcast for you to share your leadership journey. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have reached your final destination. Thank you for choosing the Crosswind Approach. Now go lead your mission with clarity, confidence, and courage, and we will see you on the next flight. Thank you for joining me on the Crosswind Approach. If today's conversation helped you think differently about leadership, financial clarity, or navigating uncertainty, I would encourage you to subscribe to the podcast and share this episode with another mission-driven leader. And if you'd like to learn more about my work as a CPA and fractional CFO supporting nonprofits and mission-focused organizations, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll find the link in the show notes, and I'd love to continue the conversation there. Until next time, keep your instruments calibrated, your communication clear, and your mission moving forward.